Okay, it's a little past 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Urbana City Council. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Present.
Mr. Bowersox?
Present.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Present.
Mr. Lewis?
Present.
Mr. Roberts?
Present.
Mr. Smythe?
Here.
Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing.
The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. And the clerk's office has issued some corrections to what was originally mailed out. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Where are the corrections?
Right here. It was just that it's the Fine Arts Review Committee that Theodore Zernich was appointed to, and the 10th person on the Citizen Police Review is Reverend Troy Burks. I had not given them the updated list, I guess, so I gave it to them, and they've made a correction.
There were two typos I caught in the original set. I don't know if those have been corrected as well.
Okay, first of all, can we have a motion to approve?
I would make that motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion by Dennis Roberts, second by...
Second. Okay. Oh, okay. In the petitions and communications, it refers to 122 West Main. I think that's 123 West Main.
Okay.
I don't know if that's been fixed yet or not. It is 123 West Main, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the last sentence, it has 20 have couples. It should be 20 couples have. Two words are reversed.
Okay, are there any other additions or corrections?
I do have one,
Okay.
Mayor. On page 4, near the bottom of the page, just before the words reports and special committees, it says that the next meeting of the Committee of the Whole will be at 7 p.m. on Monday, June the 13th, 2005, and that's an error. I'm assuming it meant September 26th.
Okay. Any other corrections? All those in favor of the minutes as corrected, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next, petitions, or additions to the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, petitions and communications. I have one person. Gabe, would you like to state your name and address?
Gabe, 2409 North High Cross. The mayor just informed me that we'll probably have the votes for tonight, and I just want to thank some people. Even though I probably don't agree very much with Danielle, I was very happy with your civility the last time. And Brandon, obviously you have the interests of the city at heart, and I met the mayor for the first time. And I would like to say that I admire her quiet dignity and the professionalism of most of the members of staff at the city of Urbana. And all throughout the period I was there this last week, everybody seemed to apologize on behalf of Mr. Smythe. So I accept that apology, and thank you once again.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make a statement? All right. Old business. Ordinance number 2005-08-125, an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement with Gabriel Omo Osagi, a pedestrian bridge. Is that? Director of Public Works want to say anything about this or not? Okay, Libby.
I passed out some updates for this case. One is a new version of the agreement. It's the first whereas, has a slight wording change. It's more accurate to the specifics of this case and how it was originally constructed. And also have passed out the second TIF redevelopment incentive program application that was received this past week after the packets went out, and this is for remodeling of the 119 West Main, the former Daisy's Diner space for Uncommon Grounds. So this would be the second of 3 applications. And a correction in the memorandum on the estimated revenues for the parking deck are closer to $9,000 per year for those tenants on the second floor, including Gabe's Place. This does not include the short-term tenants, but I did go back and verify those numbers with Finance and with Public Works. And so the amount directly from Gabe's Place would be closer to $4,000 per year, but again, that doesn't include the short-term rentals. So wanted to clarify that, and otherwise in the memorandum, provide background on a lot of the issues raised last time on how the redevelopment program relates to this, improved cost estimate information, including the new replacement bid, low bid of $60,000, and some of the discussion on background of working with the developer and with his attorney, and additional information on the access requirements and the impact on the tenants in the building. Changes on the agreement, in addition to the one correction I just noted, recognize that state law that prohibits altering a public facility, so it's made less accessible, changes the low bid to the $60,000 amount, and then, as suggested at the last council meeting, that there's a recognition of participation in the redevelopment incentive program for this property. Any questions?
Mr. Smythe?
On the bottom of page 3 of the memo that you sent out, dated September 15th, it says, after consulting with his attorney, Mr. Omosagi declined the city's request. He did, however, offer to pay the requested amount if it could be repaid through forgiveness of parking rental costs in the parking deck over a period of 3 years. I didn't understand that, and are we going to get any sharing in the cost of the pedestrian bridge from Mr. Omosagi?
Well, the offer was presumably to pay up front for these parking costs, and we felt that since this would not result in any net contribution to the city, that probably wasn't necessary to include at this time. We do have funds budgeted through MVPS, so we felt that, that wasn't really important to the city at this point from a budgetary standpoint.
Okay, my second question is with paragraph 4 of the agreement, which I think doesn't really change. And it says that he's proposing to invest $220,000 towards improvements to the building as part of the facade loan program and so on. I'm still looking for an agreement more along the lines of our traditional developers agreements. What guarantees do we have in that program that would give us some recompense if he fails to put in approximately this amount of money?
This works basically on a rebate basis, so you need to submit, in fact, some of the documentation's been attached, that you need to submit bids from contractors for the actual amounts, and those need to be verified both by our economic development specialist and by the bank. So there's absolutely no way under this program to take the money and run. It's for performance. That's the way the program's set up. It's a program, when we do development agreements, would tend to be larger projects where this might be one of the elements, and we might be dealing with a tenant as opposed to the owner. But we feel that there's very good protections with this program, and we have not had any defaults that I'm aware of. When people are motivated to participate in the program, it's because they're ready, the work is underway, and there's no reason to expect that that would not occur.
Okay. Is staff satisfied that we have enough of an agreement along the lines? I realize this is a bit different than something we've done in the past, it seems. Is staff satisfied that we have enough leverage here to warrant the investment of $60,000 in the pedestrian bridge?
I think that's one of the reasons for the positive recommendation. There's a number of others that relate more to the parking deck and its usability and the legal status of the ownership of the bridge. And those are nine reasons for the positive recommendation are listed, and the participation in the redevelopment is one of those. So that is an important factor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Omasagi took my comments 2 weeks ago in the wrong way. They weren't meant that way, but it was very frustrating trying to get him to understand that what I was looking for was some kind of a guarantee of his participation. Now that we understand the program a little better, now that we understand our potential legal obligations, though I feel very strongly that he owns the bridge. But clearly, we could probably waste more money trying to determine that in a court than just paying his share of this bridge. So I understand from speaking with others that this is a very important structure for downtown. So, I accept this agreement and staff's recommendation. I hope to never see something like this again while I'm on the council. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of ordinance number 2005-08-125, an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement with Gabriel Omasagi, please signify. I guess we have to have a roll call on this one.
Because it's money.
A roll call. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes. The ordinance is approved. Thank you. Next, reports of standing committees, the committee of the whole. Danielle? Committee of the whole.
First, we have ordinance number 2005-09-137. This refers to an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance police review board training. So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote. Would the clerk please, or is there any discussion? Okay, it's a roll call. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes. Also the mayor. please vote.
And Mayor Pressing?
Yes.
Next, we have the city council goals. This was moved from committee to council with recommendation for approval, I believe. So I so moved it.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, very quickly, I'm very happy that we've reached this point. I'd like to thank all of the council members and the mayor for their participation in getting to here. I think this is a very important document that'll help guide us through the next few years. To staff, I'd like to encourage them to look at this with an open mind and as a helpful tool for helping us all work together to accomplish some very needed things for the city. I understand that it looks like a lot of work. It is a lot of work. But it's the only way we're going to be moving into a position of being proactive in dealing with some of the many problems that we've identified, or for getting to solutions that we think are creative and needed to make this a better city. To get there, we need to be fully staffed. I think that is, there are a number of priorities in here, but a lot of them depend on having full staffing for police, for planning, for economic development in particular. I think when we first came onto the council, it was very clear that we wanted an economic development director on board as quickly as possible. Here we are getting into September. I'm not happy that position is still vacant. Now, happily, we're filling other positions that need to be filled as well, but I'd really like to see this filled. I'm also concerned that the 3 police officers that we've approved for halfway into the budget, I understand they're coming, but we've also had some additional absences and other issues that have come up in between. again, I get back to my point of keeping people in the pipeline. We know these things happen. We know there are going to be vacancies. I'd be a lot more comfortable if we did a better job at keeping things in the pipeline. But above all, I'd like to see us fully staffed as quickly as possible so we can tackle these goals with the mayor and with staff. Thank you all.
Ms. Chenoweth?
I have a small revision to the goals document based on some conversations with staff since we did this, and since this is an ever-evolving document, I thought we would include the change now, and I'm sure we'll be coming back to this document to make other changes. So under number 3, which refers to downtown, we have number B, or letter B, which says create and implement redevelopment plan for Broadway corridor. After speaking to staff, because different parts of downtown present different opportunities in terms of property acquisition, et cetera, I'd like to change that to create and implement redevelopment plans for key segments of downtown. So that council isn't necessarily specifying do it on Broadway, but is saying come back to us with some plans for creating a kind of bustling area of activity in downtown, and staff has some different ideas for that they'll be bringing forward. So the change is to create and implement redevelopment plans for key segments of downtown. That's 3B. That's a motion, amendment.
I'd accept it as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Would all those in favor please say aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, we have our goals for
Congratulations.
today, at least. And I hope that council members will let me know which ones of these they'd like to work on. I know I've talked with Lynn about working on the neighborhood safety. So all of you can get together and figure out which ones you want to work on. So we'll have council members and probably members of the public appointed to task force to do various of these too. Robert?
It was my understanding that we were going to, after staff took a look, that we would get together and start the process of grouping things relative to the various people that enjoy a specific area. But additionally, I think, most importantly, I think, once we get staff's input, is to prioritize our approach so that we really understand the direction we want to take, and we can give direction appropriately.
And we also have time to build this into the budget, because these do have budget implications, and some of them might, be a couple of years down the road, but, okay. Next, reports of officers.
I think I'd like Rex to give us a briefing on deployment. And while he's getting ready, I'll just say, I've had an opportunity to talk with staff members and staff meeting regarding the goals. And I assure you that our staff embraces the leadership of the council. It's a question of management for us. How do we allocate the time and the resources to make things happen? And then how do we prioritize what we have time to do? So we're working on that, and I don't really see an issue at all. It may not happen as quickly as you would like, but we will work hard to make it happen. And that's a commitment of all city staff.
Next month, the fire chief.
Good evening. Since the last time we've met, we did receive the phone call from the state asking if we would consider in our division, which covers Champaign County, in the next wave of deployment to New Orleans. Between Saturday and Sunday, there were 2 different phases were sent down. There was an advanced team that went down late Saturday night, drove straight through to New Orleans, and then the second phase went in Sunday morning. At this point, this last round that will cover for a 2-week period, effectively starting Sunday, involves the cities of Champaign, Urbana, Decatur, Bloomington, Normal, and Danville. And that put together a deployment team of approximately 19 firefighters. The city of Urbana, in this wave, contributed 5 firefighters, including 2 officers, 1 chief officer, and 1 engine. And again, this runs for a 2-week period. At this present time, all our staffing remains exactly the same on all of our apparatus. We're maintaining it either in regular staffing or, if necessary, overtime. So the services to our citizens have not been affected by this whatsoever, And as usual, we handle it as best we can within the city, but at the same time, if we have anything of any size, the two cities work together automatically every day. And so it's just a second thought for the resources to go either side of Bright Street. The deployment again will run about 2 weeks, and it's up in the air if there'll be any more. We have some inklings that this may end for the state of Illinois at the end of 2 weeks, but that will be at the governor's level for that decision to be made. Let's see here. The activities, to give you an update what they're actually doing. The deployment team was broken into 2 task force. Their base camp is Our Lady of Holy Angel campus in the southeast quadrant of New Orleans. And they are dividing on, they work 24 on, they work 24 off. And they are responding to fire calls in downtown New Orleans, and they also serve with what's called the RIT team, where if another fire department or personnel are in fighting a fire, they go in as the rescue crew to stand by in the event they need help themselves to get out. On their off time, they are, this thing started in the first wave and they're continuing it, that the Illinois firefighters, and especially our division, are involved in helping voluntarily, while they're taking their off time, to go into the city and help them restore their fire stations, and also at the same time helping some of the New Orleans firefighters to try to get their homes repaired. And when they arrived, there were only 3 fire stations open in the entire city. When they left on Sunday, they were up to 9, so they still have 21 stations to go. So there's still quite a bit of work to do, at least on that part for the community. But it's been a very effective program. It's a little better than what it first was when they got there. But they're living in tents provided by FEMA with swamp coolers, which is a fan blowing over black ice. But that, I believe, is everything I have for you, unless you have any questions.
Any questions?
I guess there's concern about Hurricane Rita developing and striking through there again. What are the contingencies for that, and how would our people be involved?
Okay, I spoke with, we are in contact with our personnel twice a day and preparing a newsletter for both the families as well as the staff. And just at 5 o'clock, I was speaking to D.C. Road Trammell, and we were discussing that. And as you may have seen in the evening news, they've already shut the city back down, where they were allowing citizens to go back in, and they're preparing, if the path changes, they're moving everybody out and moving them to higher ground and further inland. So well, I think we'll have more information, since the storm is now still just around the base of Florida, that we're going to have a good picture. And obviously, I think that the roads won't be as busy this time to get out of the area if they have to if they have to back out of the community.
Any other questions?
Then I have one more report, Fire Factor. This weekend is our 2nd annual Fire Factor program at the University of Illinois. We started this last spring, and it's now become annual, beginning with the school year. We put together a program hoping to increase the awareness of college students to the danger of fire. When these young people come to school, that's the last thing they're thinking about is safety. And so we've been working on this for about 3 years, and it's a quite effective program where they spend a day, and this involves students both from regular housing, the Greek Society on the campus, certified housing, and even off-campus apartments. And it's a day spent in giving them a good awareness of the dangers of fire, and also some hands-on experience. And so I'd like to invite the council to consider coming out on Sunday. It's a long day, but you do not have to spend all day. Stop in, take a look, and you'll find it quite entertaining and quite interesting. So to let you know that Fire Factor is going on this weekend. And this year, for the first time, the federal government has declared this the Campus Fire Safety Week, which is now leading up to the Fire Factor when every other school is doing it. So, thank you. Yes.
And again, good hours for us to come would be?
Well, if you'd like lunch, it's courtesy of the program, which is a joint partnership between the 2 cities and the university. The program starts at 8. I would not show up at 8. That's a lot of training and so forth for the students to get ready to go out and do the activities. I would say between 10 and 2 would be a good time to stop by and see activities and get to meet some of the people and some of the students. Thank you.
And I was going to ask, what's the best way to access the area that you're going to be operating in?
If I may suggest, why don't you just contact me, and we'll send you or get you a little map to get you back to the facility, because it's a little out of sight. It's at the Illinois Fire Service Institute. You may recognize it more from the towers if you're driving down Windsor, but getting back in there can be a little bit of a challenge.
Ms. Chenoweth.
Just briefly, this was actually, should have been under special committees, but the CU Joint Telecommunications Commission, which is a joint commission between Champaign and Urbana, voted at our last meeting to request councils to sign on to letters recommending to our legislators to oppose House and Senate bills, which would basically cut hundreds of thousands of dollars from our budget through franchise fees with cable companies. And so there's aggressive legislation that's going through, or currently making its way through the process. I believe the mayor spoke about this at our last meeting and said she had contacted Representative Johnson and perhaps our senators as well. This weekend, I'll be going to a telecommunications conference in Washington, D.C. as a commissioner, and what I'd like to do is, I wasn't able to prepare something for this evening, I just got back from Jackson, but I'm hoping to get a letter to you that you could review and basically lend your name to. I'm also going to be asking the mayor and all the council members. Champaign is doing something similarly. I believe it should be coming before them either tomorrow or next Tuesday. So the goal is for both cities, hopefully unanimous support to oppose these bills that essentially takes, it removes significant revenue streams for our cities through essentially forcing us to give away our right-of-way to cable companies with no compensation whatsoever. That's really unusual for us here locally to do that. So I'm going to be asking in an email to council members if they would sign on to that. So this is basically a heads up and also a heads up to the public about this upcoming legislation.
I think a resolution is being forwarded to us that we can vote on.
Okay.
And Dennis and I were at a meeting on cable television on Saturday that was in the Champaign City Council chambers, very informative. And I'll be going to the Illinois Municipal League and also the National League of Cities, so we should be pressuring our U.S. senators as well as contacting our congressman. I think our congressman is on our side on this, at least. Yes, did you have anything else you want to say?
No, I just support it a lot. You know that in the future, in about 2 years, our own cable franchise will be needing renewal, and there is a study commission that both Danielle and I have worked on that's preparing to give advice to the Cable Commission, the Television and Telecommunications Commission, and we're hoping that because the franchise agreement has to be negotiated by both Champaign and Urbana, that they will work together to have similar goals and ask for strong support and an innovative manner of continuing the public access programs in Urbana.
Anyone else? Okay, we have Bill Gray, our Director of Public Works, under Reports of Officers.
3 quick items. First of all, backed by popular response last year, we're going to put these signs out along with other notification of our leaf pickup, our 4 leaf collection days coming up, and I know leaves are starting to fall already with the dry weather we've had. So these are leaves to be bagged in craft paper bags, etc., similar routine, but we had a lot of positive comments that people felt this was a good way to get the dates out as to when we do those pickups. Secondly, in your packet, you probably saw this brochure. This is a result of our, I'll call it our consortium of communities involved with trying to prevent stormwater pollution. And we can all have a role in that, and invite you to read through it. This is being passed out at various group meetings and other opportunities to part of our education process to let folks know what they can do to help prevent stormwater pollution. And lastly, in your packet you have found we're doing a pilot program to apply herbicide vegetation control and brick sidewalks in an area immediately east of the city building here. We're going to be trying this out, and this is part of the funding, we have budgeted for capital improvement funds every year, $75,000, and a portion of that, a small portion of that is going to be doing this work and cleaning brick sidewalks, and we'll evaluate and measure and see how this turns out as time goes on and look for subsequent such efforts. And also, with respect to brick sidewalks, just kind of an update of where we are. We have a couple major projects in the works here for next year, and those details are so noted. So I wanted to let you all find out about that.
Are there any questions? Mr. Roberts?
Not so much a question as I wish to thank the Public Works Department for taking some initiative and addressing the concern of the viability of walking and traveling on the sidewalks, which there has not really been any concerted effort to maintain them by the city. It's been pretty much up to the residents to clear their sidewalks of grass and overgrowth, and I think this trial project will be a very interesting educational experience for the neighborhood, and if it turns out to be a successful project, we may see it occur on an annual basis. So I know that the people who are in the East Urbana neighborhood, which is my ward, have responded pretty positively about this information. I know they've all been receiving the brochures on their doorsteps announcing it, and I've seen the arrows on the sidewalks indicating which sections will be sprayed and treated. And I understand that later on, after the dead grass, the grass dies, that there will be a crew to remove the debris. So I think it's a very positive trial run.
Mr. Smythe?
I think it's a little ironic to be talking about stormwater on one hand and herbicides on the other. I assume we're using something that's environmentally safe as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Just a quick request, if a plain text email could be sent out to all the neighborhood organizations with the leaf pickup dates, that'll save council members from having to do that, which we typically do every year. So if you could just instead of it being sent out as an attachment where mostly people don't read it, just plain text sent out to SUNA, UNA, UCAN, etc. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
And I have to ask this again. Can I ask this? Do you think that it'll ever happen that there'll be also included in the leaf pickup branch debris pickup? I know it's not going to happen this year, but say next year. Or, do you think it's possible to consider such a pickup? Or is there a lot of expense involved in that kind of thing?
It's a cost decision. It's largely a cost decision. Branches are bundled separately then, not in the bag, and they're a little more bulkier to handle, and has to be certain lengths, certain weights involved too for contractors to deal with. So it's largely an expense matter.
Are the branches, if they were picked up, chipped by a machine, or are they just tossed into the landfill as the bundles?
Well, no yard waste goes to a landfill.
Okay.
So it would all go to our landscape recycling center.
Yes, okay.
But those are some details that need to be worked out, but generally for residential branches, it's usually bundled, and the hauler sells little tags or stickers for a couple, $3 or whatever per bundle, and picks them up and puts them in the packer, and then that's taken out to LRC for processing. Okay. That's usually how it's done.
And I will say I got a communication from a citizen of Urbana who is very happy with the new pedestrian crosswalk signs on Main Street in downtown.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. New business, ordinance number 2005-09-138, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat for Southridge subdivision, plan case number 1955-S-05.
So moved.
Second.
Would you like to please?
Any questions? Or? Oh, really? Okay. This is a final plat for Southridge 6 subdivision. This is located to the south of the Myra Ridge subdivision, east of where Southridge 5 subdivision is currently.
Would you like to speak a little bit more?
Oh, sorry. Okay. As I was saying, this is located south of Myra Ridge subdivision, east of the South Ridge 5 subdivision, which is currently under construction. The plat will extend Myra Ridge Drive southward and create 32 residential lots to the east of it. City Council approved a preliminary plat for South Ridge subdivisions phases 5, 6, and 7 in 2001. There were some waivers in that for mountable curb on Myra Ridge Drive. And because the proposed final plat substantially conforms to the preliminary plat, the subdivision code allows the City Council to approve this without it going back to the Plan Commission. The preliminary plat approved 175 lots. Council approved the 51-lot final phase of South Ridge 5 in 2003. Construction of those lots is nearly complete. Preliminary site construction work has already begun on South Ridge 6, and the developer expects to begin construction subsequent to council approval here. The proposed plat has been sent out to appropriate agencies for review and approval. Some of them are still reviewing. We haven't gotten all the comments in, although we do not expect any substantial comments or changes to be as a result of that. Let's see, an annexation agreement in 2001 brought this property into the city. Under the provisions of that agreement, part of the site is zoned R2, single-family residential, and part is zoned R3, single and two-family residential. Design and construction plans for all the streets have been reviewed and approved by the Public Works Departments. This will be creating Memory Lane. That's going to be a minor street. The extension of Myra Ridge Lane and the creation of Hillshire Drive are being developed as local collector streets. Again, the waiver that we had reduced Memory Lane from our normal requirement of 31 feet to 28 feet. It also reduced the requirement for a center line radius at the curves at the ends of Memory Lane. The plat conforms to all requirements for necessary utilities. Most of them are going to be located in the 15-foot easements along the street frontages. Most of the entire east border of the subdivision is a large drainage easement, which will be developed as a dry basin drainage facility called Brashear Park that is proposed to be dedicated to the Urbana Park District. The developers are still negotiating the details of that dedication. Let's see. Public Works Department again has reviewed and approved the construction plans for the park dry detention basin facility and the stormwater and sewer system throughout the preliminary plat area. As a summary of findings, City Council approved the preliminary plat for this area in 2001. Waivers were granted at that time, and additional waivers were granted in 2002. The requested final plat is consistent with the provisions of those ordinances as it relates to road network access, drainage, and utilities. The final plat, again, is consistent with the preliminary plat. It's consistent with the requirements of the Urbana Subdivision and Land Development Code, with the exception of the waivers previously granted. There are no additional requested waivers. And finally, the proposed final plat is consistent with the 2005 Comprehensive Plan land use and roadway designations for the site. City Council has the options to approve the proposed final plat or deny the proposed final plat, and staff recommends that Council approve the requested final plat.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Chenoweth?
I just have a single question about dedication of parkland. Does our subdivision code require that when a large-scale subdivision, and now at this point Myra Ridge constitutes a large-scale subdivision, when it's platted, that it dedicate a certain amount to parkland?
No, it does not.
Okay, so there's no requirement to actually generate a park?
No, we do not have that yet. In addition, the Urbana Park District, because of operational concerns, prefers to have parks of a minimum of 5 acres.
Would this park be the 7 1/4 acre, or would part of that be a detention basin and therefore not park space?
The Park District would be responsible for the entire thing. My understanding, though, and I haven't actually looked closely at a topographic map of it, my understanding is that only about 5.3 of it would be available for actual activity.
Okay. So has the Park District accepted this offer yet?
No, they have not. It's still under discussion.
Okay.
We certainly hope they will. We won't be able to record the plat until they do.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, some kind of different plans will have to be made.
Okay, like the homeowners association taking care of it.
Correct.
Is it planned for the near future that we require park dedication in our subdivision code? You said something about yet, and I know we've kind of discussed this before. Is it, I mean, now that we've completed our comprehensive plan, is it in the works that we would require park dedication in the future?
It is in the works that we will complete the revisions to our subdivision code. I can't necessarily say that we will be able to put in park dedication requirements. We really don't want to make any demands that our theoretical competitors of Champaign and Savoy would make. And again, there's various economic factors that are involved with that. Some discussion will still be necessary on that.
There have been discussions with Champaign on whether this would be advisable for the two communities, and the City of Champaign had requested investigation of that. Last I had heard, they did not have the support of the Champaign Park District, interestingly. We've done assessment, though, of where we stand in terms of acres of parkland per 1,000 population. We're above standard. So our park district, even without this requirement, has been able to anticipate and keep up with that demand, such that we actually have twice the acres of park per 1,000 population than Champaign does. So it may very well be that what Champaign needs to do with respect to their subdivision ordinance might be different than what Urbana needs to do. But we continue to discuss it both with the park districts and with the City of Champaign.
Okay. I do just want to comment that I'm happy to see more than 5 acres being dedicated to parkland on this project, and I commend the Hills for putting that into this project. I think it's really important for health, safety, recreation, all the good things in life for people to have access to green space. So I hope that you can work something out with the park district so that this is accessible to people in Myra Ridge to use into the future. So.
Libby, did you say that we have twice as much as the standard, or just twice as much as Champaign when it comes to parkland per?
We have twice as much as Champaign, and we are above the standard. But certainly, there's a range. Standard has a range. We're above the top end of that range, whereas Champaign may be towards the lower end of that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Snyder?
I was just going to point out that any consideration of this, we have to be real careful, because some communities have ended up with little pieces here and there, and they're not contiguous, and they end up having to pay to mow them and stuff like that. So as we consider, if we consider something like this, the park district's right. They want, decent-sized pieces of property that they can work with. So anything that we would do, we'd probably want to do very closely with the park district.
Mr. Roberts.
It's going to be a dry drainage, drainage retention configuration. So it's going to be looking like a drainage ditch, perhaps, but be grassed or play areas.
My understanding is that part of it, the north part, which will be connecting to an east-west 8-foot wide bicycle path, that will have a path on it. I don't know if there's going to be any play equipment up there. The southern part would be the drainage basin itself. The Park District has already requested that they seed it, and I think they were going to put in some kinds of flowers. The idea of a dry drainage basin facility is that when it rains a lot, the water will pour from the storm sewers into there, fill it up, and it will be able to be detained for a few hours and then slowly trickle back out. Most of the time it would be essentially dry, and the grass would be out of a length that people could walk around or run in it, but at the very lowest points it might be a little bit muddy down there. In that way, it's going to be a great deal like Myra Ridge Park to the north.
Is there a reason why a subdivision plan goes to this kind of a water retention facility rather than making a permanent pond, or that's basically the typical way of handling drainage water?
You'd have to ask our city engineer that.
Okay. In other words, I was wondering if it was required for the total subdivision to have some sort of a drainage ditch, and that's how they're solving it.
It's largely developer preference, whether they want to make it retention with water or detention dry.
But they have to come up with something for the acreage of their subdivision,
Correct,
right?
yes.
And this is the solution?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
Not a
Ms.
question,
Stevenson.
just a comment. I have driven out in this neighborhood in Carl Hill, and Mr. Dooley have done a fine job of creating a very fine living area out there, and I just would say hats off to their development, and I'd say yes to this ordinance.
Anyone else? All right, this is ordinance number 2005-09-138, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat for South Ridge subdivision, plan case number 1955-S-05. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Next is Scottswood Area Stormwater Improvement Project. Bill Gray, our Public Works Director.
Okay. A lot to talk about, and I'll try to condense this as best I can. But this stormwater improvement project for the Scottswood area is a very exciting project. It's a project that has 7 governmental agencies working hand in hand to make this happen. It's come about over the last 7 or 8 years. And we're trying to help out an area of East Urbana, just outside our corporate limits, where we've had chronic flooding problems for many years. Speaking of detention basins, like in the South Ridge area, what was lacking or absent in this particular subdivision when it was built years ago was the combination of off-site stormwater and detention in order to help prevent street flooding and property damage. So this problem was identified early on, and through a series of many meetings, public information meetings, staff meetings, consultant meetings, working with the governmental agencies as listed in this memo, we are very close to that point in time where we'll be looking at going out for bids for a $2 million improvement. The improvement involves a large 14-acre-feet detention facility, which is also a wetland facility. The Urbana Park District has done a master plan of the 60-acre Weaver Park area to incorporate this detention wetland facility into the park system. The park will also have playing fields, soccer, baseball, trails. It also preserves the remnants of the Big Grove area at the north end of the park. And this will be more or less in the east or central part of this Weaver Park. From the basin, then there's a very large diameter storm sewer that will travel south, what we call along Baker Lane, but it's a kind of a north-south right-of-way that the city has, to Washington Street. And then it will intercept some existing sewers on Washington Street and route them east on Washington to the Peffer Farm area, where there is a large 72-inch diameter storm sewer that is owned by the St. Joe Drainage District. So we have the St. Joe Drainage District involved. One of their roles will be the spreading of an assessment for the local contribution. We have the Champaign County involved because a few reasons, but primarily the new nursing facility needs to have detention for its site, and rather than take up valuable land on the Brookins complex there, this will be able to park that water off-site adjacent to where the nursing home is going to go. The Urbana Park District is an integral player because they purchased, they own the land where we want to put this facility. The Prairie School, the Urbana School District's involved. They'll see some benefits of the additional playing fields nearby, some shared additional parking that will be involved, and also some handling some of the stormwater runoff from the school site. The city will see benefits. First of all, we have had flooding problems in the area immediately south of Main Street for a while. We don't have a good outlet up there, which will be improved with this project. Also in Smith Lane, we have frequently on heavy rains at Large Lake where Lantern Hill and Smith Lane intersect, and this will help alleviate those situations. And also, when we do improve Washington Street to the east, to High Cross Road, this is Washington Street in this area, east of Smith Lane is unimproved, no storm sewers. We will be able to take advantage of this large diameter storm sewer, and when we do those street improvements with curb and gutter, we can attach lead lines from the inlets and such to those storm sewers. So, and of course Urbana Township is the ones responsible for the streets and sewers in Scottswood. They are technically the applicant for this project. We have also, when I say we, the sub-agencies collectively, we have received Community Development Assistance Program grants, 4 separate grants, the last being almost $400,000 to help offset the large costs to do such a project. So there's been planning grants, engineering grants, and 2 construction grants that we've received over these last several years. So all in all, we have in place now a project that's poised to move forward. Now, we do have a neighborhood meeting on September 28th at Prairie School starting at 6 o'clock. There will be a brief presentation at 7 o'clock. We're sending postcard notices out. They've been mailed out to 600 or so residences in this area. Most of the residences are in the county. However, in this watershed area, there are people that do live in Urbana that are part of this watershed and will be a beneficiary, if you will, of this improvement. However, as a beneficiary of these improvements also involves an assessment. So we need to communicate with these folks that there will be some assessments for those folks, some that live north of Main Street, kind of east and west of Smith Lane. There's about 16 parcels in Urbana. There are also then several parcels south of Washington Street that start more or less from Lenore Drive and move over to and east of Smith Drive, and including 2 apartment complexes in that area. The city also has some property that it owns and would be included in those assessments. The total assessed value for Urbana residents is around $300,000. In the memo, we break out what those costs would be. This is a complicated assessment, and it's complicated for a variety of reasons. First of all, there's phase 1 benefits, which is the large diameter storm sewers to get to the detention basin. That's a phase 1 project. The phase 2 is the detention facility itself, wetland, and also some other improvements within the Scottswood subdivision. Within those 2 phases, there's also people that benefit from a moderate to higher to highest levels. So this makes for, as I said, a kind of a complicated way of assessing the benefiting properties. But as listed in the packet you received, we get into some of the details as to what the assessments would be for those folks that are in Urbana. So one thing to consider, we don't need a decision tonight on, and I'd be happy to answer questions, but one is that do we want to consider the use of community development block grant monies to help offset the costs that our Urbana residents would be assessed? Keep in mind that the CDAP grants that we've received are monies available for only those parcels outside the corporate limits. Our counterpart to that is the CDBG grant monies. So this nearly $800,000 or so that have been received are technically benefiting or reducing the assessment of those properties in the county, not in the city. So in like thinking, we may want to consider, again, community development block grant monies in the 2006 annual action plan. That's something for consideration. And quite frankly, there are greater public benefits that one could justify a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount that could go towards helping further lower the assessed value of these people's homes that would be assessed. So there's a lot of material here. We've had past council updates in the last 7 years that have occurred, but we're on the cusp of looking at construction that would probably be occurring in 2006 to the tune of $1.5 million or more dollars here, depending what the bids are. So it's an exciting project, and it's a needed project in this Scottswood area, and I think it's good for everyone involved.
Any questions? Mr. Smythe?
Yeah, Bill, kudos to all involved in getting this here. I think it's a really great example of intergovernmental cooperation. I assume you had a small role in getting all this to happen?
Yes.
Who would take responsibility for overseeing the engineering of all this? Would that be you, or is this a county, or how's that going to go?
Actually, the oversight would be by consultants, which happens to be Burns Clancy Associates as the consultant. So they came up with the plans and specifications for the Phase 1 and Phase 2 improvements, and they would be the resident engineer for the construction project.
Okay, and they would answer to this consortium then?
Absolutely. They are in all our meetings when the consortium meets. They're there every step of the way. One other thing I failed to mention is that when this project is over, the city will be responsible for the maintenance and ownership of the large diameter sewers. The detention wetland facility will be the responsibility of the Park District, however. So we break that line off where the pipe starts, where the water drains from the detention facility.
I guess my follow-up question would probably be more to community development, is how taking money from community development block grants and putting it into here, how that would impact our programs and so on.
Well, this is why we recommend deferring that analysis till when we do the annual action plan. I know there's some street lighting projects that we've talked about and other new ideas that might require CDBG funding. Paint program was another proposal. So we will see what our allocation is and other proposals that come up. And there's a lot of great ideas for CDBG, and if we're lucky, we'll be able to get them all done. But until we actually do the annual action plan, we won't know for sure what we can get done. Any other questions? Mr. Lewis.
I'm sure you, Burns and Clancy's looked at this, but I don't know if the general public would know to what level of flooding have they considered this detention basin?
To what level of flooding? This will cover pretty much up to a 50-year storm event. Is that what you mean? What level of flooding? Right. So,
because I noticed the close proximity of the housing to the immediate east of that basin. If it got over.
Well, the flood routing is such that it would be routed south. Okay. There would be south toward Washington Street away from those homes if it would happen to overtop. But there's probably, quite frankly, a little bit greater than 50-year storage capacity in this facility. But that was the targeted design.
And the other question would be, since there's CF and CDBG funds in the mix, has anyone looked at the collective group of people involved here and see if the government would up the ante on this?
We have maxed out the CDAP grant possibilities. We were very successful with help of a lot of people to get those grant dollars, and in fact, the mere fact that we went for 2 grant rounds for construction related. We broke it up into 2 phases. That was a ingenious thought several years ago. Rather than going with one project, we thought we'd break it up into 2 phases and help maximize another $300,000+. So I think as far as assistance from the state, we are at our limit.
I have a quick question, which is, just so I understand the process, in reading the memo, it's my understanding that lots within certain areas are assessed fees to pay for this project, to offset the difference between the grants and what it's going to cost.
Yes.
And that this would be paid by the owners of the property, not necessarily the tenants of the property.
Correct. It's the owners, and it would be probably it could be a 15 or more year period of time.
Okay.
That actual term hasn't been yet determined yet, but it'll be no less than 10, it'll be at least 10 years, but we're talking probably 15 or more. So for example, like these 128 homes that are at $800 per lot, if that's over a 10-year period of time, of course, that would be $80 per year plus interest. Maybe $95, $100 per year, or what have you. But if it's greater, then that's going to reduce that annual payment even more.
And there are folks who live within the city and outside of the city who are affected, and I guess I see those folks as being different in that one group of people pays city taxes to pay for public infrastructure, and the other group of people do not pay taxes to pay for city infrastructure, but they're both being assessed fees, correct, that are based on the size of the acreage of their lot. So I'm not sure if CDBG is the right funds for this, simply because I'm afraid of how it might squeeze our other programs. It also makes sense to me that taxpayers should receive benefit of city infrastructure improvements, and I consider this to be an infrastructure improvement. So I guess the question is, where does the money come from, and is CDBG the right place, or does it come just out of our CIP plan? At this point, I would be, if you're asking for our opinion, we haven't gotten to the point where we've seen exactly what the impacts on CDBG would be like. Until we look at our annual action plan, we won't. But I would be inclined to take it out of the general CIP instead of making the pie for poor people in our community even smaller. That's, I think, we can bear the cost of this just like the whole community bore the cost of Vine Street improvements, or the whole community bore the cost of brick sidewalk improvements in certain areas. Or, what we try to do is we try to spread it out as much as possible to make sure that each neighborhood receives this benefits of the CIP. And I consider this to be very similarly. And so I'd be inclined to not use CDBG funds, but it might mean that we have to elongate the timeline for some other project in our CIP plan. So that's my opinion at this point.
Any other questions? Ms. Barnes?
Just wondering, are you asking for a motion?
No, he's just doing
No, it's just
information only?
information.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Going back to ordinance number 2005-08-125, we did have a roll call vote, but the clerk, I don't think I must have restated who made the motion. Do you recall who made the motion and the second on that? It was Charlie Smith who moved, and was it Heather?
Heather, I think.
Okay, all right. Motion by Mr. Smythe, Heather's, since she had to leave early, and seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Okay. Any other business to come before the City Council? And we did have a reception for a candidate, so if you'd like some treats after the meeting, they're here.
Oh, Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Roberts.
I was informed by Robert that he'd prefer that I would take the next turn to lead the Committee of the Whole.
Okay, the next Committee of the Whole.
So I guess I will, and those people who have items for the agenda can forward them to the city clerk or to myself.
That's September 26th, correct?
That's right, next Monday, September 26th.
Okay, seeing there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Record.